Onslaught has been out for a few weeks now, and many players are diving in to get all the loot they can. However, due to Legend Onslaught being a pretty time-consuming and RNG enemy-based system, it can make it really difficult to get clears, and making that highly sought-after emblem quite difficult to obtain. My name is Dan, and I've helped dozens of people complete their Wave 50 Legend Onslaught to get their emblem, and I've come across a lot of tips I use that I think you could use as well to make your life in Legend Onslaught easier. Now, as the waves numbers get into the high 30s and 40s, the main thing that can wipe a team even in the early waves aren't the boss waves themselves, but actually the mini boss waves. I'm talking those wizards, those servitors, those ogres, and of course that darn Tormentor. This is where most teams fall apart, either to the bosses or to the ads that spawn and destroy the ADU. However, if you know how best to approach each boss and wave, then you can be better prepared for when they show up and how to defend the ADU and defeat the bosses. Now, my first rule of thumb when preparing for the boss waves are that you will get a boss twice every 10 waves. Starting from wave 1, every wave ending in the number 3 and 9 will be a boss wave. This is usually right after a bonus objective wave, which normally spawns every wave that ends in number 2 and 8. Now obviously these things all happen before the portal spawns, where you go inside and deal with the Rift Spark or an actual boss wave. Now keep in mind, this is a rule of thumb, but occasionally you will not get a bonus round before the boss wave. When you do get a boss wave, it is best to save that heavy box that spawns until you see the red text of what mini boss is spawning in. This will allow players to go into the mini boss wave at full heavy because everyone will need it to clear this wave smoothly. Also, communicating to the rest of the team that the current wave is almost up and to prepare for a possible boss wave is absolutely crucial. Everyone not being on the same page about the boss wave will normally cause the bosses to spawn and someone to die because they didn't know the boss was coming and where to expect it to show up. So get into the rhythm of calling out the soon-to-be end of the wave, and once you see the red text of which boss is spawning, to call it out multiple times. Now that we've gotten all that out the way, let's talk you through how to efficiently deal with these bosses. Some of them can be easy, others can be quite difficult, especially if you get it at wave 49. Knowing how to communicate with your team is important as well, so we'll make sure everyone is on the same page on what to do when the boss shows up. We're going to focus on bosses that spawn in Midtown and Vostok, mainly because most players are only playing on those two maps. So if you want some more about moth yards, I'll make a video if you let me know. Let's start with Fallen. Everything that we apply to Fallen can be applied to Hive, with the exception of a few things. Fallen has way more issues, causes way more wipes of teams, so we're going to prioritize calling out these things first. Fallen are arguably the worst enemy to fight here and has its tough share of bosses, the worst being the Brigs. The Brig, whether you're capping the points or simply defeating the shield bomber, can team wipe you in seconds. However, both can be dealt with from a distance. The moment you get Brigs with the cap points, simply damage them from a distance. All lanes on both Midtown and Vostok have lanes of sight where you can damage them from a distance and break their faceplates open before they even get close enough to you to smash the ground. Doing this allows you to hang back and deal with the Fallen that are rushing towards the ADU, who are going to mess up the ADU if you don't take them out. Once the Brig's faceplates are down, you can rush and cap the far point first, then the closer one on the way back to the ADU. This way allows you to have one person cap both, while the other players defend the ADU. Now, if those other two players clear out the enemies fast enough, they can then help capture the second point while you capture the first point. Just remember to cap it quickly, as after the point is capped, it takes about 3 seconds after to fully capture and stop the scorn mine wipe. I learned this the hard way. I capped it one time late, and even though I finished capping it with 1 second left on its timer, wipes still happen. So make sure to account for a few extra seconds when planning to capture a point. The other big issue boss is the Brig Shield Sky Bomber. This guy can be especially brutal if you're coming across him in the wave 49. However, needing to stand in the essence pool grants you an empowerment buff to damage the shield. Remember, the timer of 5 seconds allows you to damage it after leaving the pool, so don't be afraid to move around while damaging it. Once the shield is gone, you can actually leave the pool and go back and meet up with the team. Doing this will allow you to help clear out the ADU enemies. However, you still have to kill that brig, so don't be afraid to turn around and chuck some rockets and some fusions and whatever at that brig from a distance until it's dead. The next enemy that probably causes the most issues are the demolitionists. These two fallen are huge and choose to constantly smash the ground. They're known for teleporting to the ADU and smashing it constantly. This is actually a good thing in my opinion, because when they both move to the bank, you can take out both of them at the same time. A simple Gallahorn and some Wolfpack round rockets will do a lot of damage and eat through their health in no time. Also, if you tether them when they get to the bank, they both share that damage. So even if one gets to the bank low health, you can still knock off a lot of health on that one and kill the other one at the same time. Remember to move away from the ADU and get to a position where all 3 players can safely dump heavy and supers into all the enemies around the ADU, because you still have to deal with all the other enemies spawning to the ADU, which is first off why we want to move away from the ADU, so we can have a line of sight to killing everything around the bank. Don't forget, when you kill the demolitionists and all the enemies around the bank, they will all drop charges. Any damage that adds due to the ADU can be removed due to all the charges that spawn from the dead bosses. Our next boss are the shielded enemies. This will be the fallen servitors, where you have to stand in the essence pool and break their shields. The same rule of thumb for the fallen shielded brig applies here. Simply stand in the pool, break the enemy's shields, then burn their health down. They don't have a lot of actual health, so you shouldn't have too much of a problem here. Lastly, for fallen, we have the fallen sky bombers. These are the 3 that spawn and hide and kneel around the various areas of the map. If you don't deal with them, they'll shoot down bombers like the big shielded bomber. They are pretty simple though if you know what to do. After a few seconds of kneeling is when the bombs start. Simply go to each one and apply some damage to them so they stand. As long as they are standing, they won't bomb the ADU. Now obviously you want to kill them all, but at the bare minimum, you should damage each one of them. My rule of thumb is to damage the closest one, then go to kill the furthest one. Afterwards, I come back and kill the first one I damaged. By then, the third is about to bomb the ADU. So the 2 people defending the ADU can either toss a nade or heavy shot at the third one, or I come back and deal with them. Even if I don't kill them, as long as it's damaged, it will stand up. Now a lot of the same things can be said here for the Hive, except a few enemy variants. The main one being the Hive cap points. These guys can be blinded, which makes it way easier to deal with early on. Simply head there and blind them over and over until you cap the point. You can either kill them or leave them and cap the other. Should you plan on doing the latter, they'll slowly make their way to the ADU. At that point, you can simply kill them then. The other boss variant that can cause issues is the shielded wizards. It's not that they are more difficult than the fallen one, it's just that they spawn a lot of wizards with them. This can be a problem simply due to not expecting it. They of course send out the poisonous cloud that slows you, and it can really hurt in wave 30s and 40s. Now the big bad that scares everyone of course is the Tormentor. Now while this Tormentor cannot be blinded, it can be corralled around to be made to look silly. Of course, if you have a turret or a decoy, it will prioritize that first so you can freely damage it. Or you can bring Divinity and the Thunderlord and Lucky Pants to demolish it as well. But what if your team didn't bring any of those things and the decoys got destroyed? Well, then your rule of thumb should be to lure the Tormentor away from the ADU at all costs. If it launches at you or throws its scythe blades at you and it misses you, it will then hit the ADU, which we do not want. So find an area to lure the aggro from the Tormentor away from the ADU. Also be mindful of the other enemies who spawn and go toward the ADU. I personally like to have 2 people focus Tormentor babysit and 1 person focus on the ADU clearing. This can normally be the Tether Hunter or your Strand Titan or your Welllock, or someone who can just do a lot of stuff by themselves and having the other 2 people just keep the Tormentor away from the ADU. Even if you die, you can respawn so long as it's not a team wipe. You're not on a timer. Take your time. Once you learn the strategy of each enemy and know when and where to deal with them, Onslaught becomes even more fun and predictable. Be sure to share these tips with your friends, and if you found this helpful and learned something, feel free to give me a like, a comment, and a share. If you watched all this and still having issues, feel free to come by the Twitch stream where we help players get their Wave 50 Legend Onslaught completions daily. Also consider subscribing. Thanks so much for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.